millennial. So I'm pretty good with technology, but sometimes it still gets the better of me. Okay, it looks like live stream is going. I think we're good to go. Okay, hello YouTube, if I am indeed on YouTube, which I think I am. Hello, hello. Yep, okay. We are on YouTube, we are on Zoom, we're good to go. Ah, hi Stacy from Colorado. Another place I haven't gotten to spend a lot of time. Well, guys, welcome. Let me go ahead and share my screen momentarily. I will keep the chat box open on my other screen. So if you have questions or comments, feel free. We can make this an interactive webinar. I'm not big on having a lot of text on my slides. I just made a slideshow so that we had some pretty visuals and so that we could have a little bit of a framework to the conversation, but this is pretty casual. This is pretty loose. We can interact, we can chat, and then I'm just going to share my wisdom for what it's worth. I don't know, but I think that as somebody who had IBS for a number of years and somebody who had done restricted dieting prior to that, which I'll get into momentarily, I think I've got some wisdom to hopefully help you navigate the holiday season, get the most out of it, really enjoy it, and ultimately prevent a flare-up of your GI symptoms. That is my goal. So let's see if I can deliver on that. And if you stay with me until the end of the webinar, I'm going to try to keep it concise too. I tend to be a talker, admittedly. Those of you who know me might realize that already. But I do have a gift at the end of this, and I'll give you the info for that if you stay tuned. So I'm going to try to make a point to get through all of the material before the end of the hour so that those of you who have to go back to work or go do something at 1 o'clock are free to do so. And if you could please turn off your little distraction machines, your little devices, unless you're watching this on your distraction machine. In that case, keep it open. But if you are on your PC right now, just go ahead and mute your phone, put it over, on a table or on a chair somewhere out of the way. And if I may be so bold, I would like to ask for your full undivided attention, please. So this is my little one slider about me. So hi, I'm Dr. DiNezza, for those of you who might not know me already. There's a number of ways you might have become aware of me or my work or this webinar, but for those of you who don't know me, this is just a picture of me and my family. It's about a year old, so I need to update it probably, but that's me and my husband, Mike, and my daughter, Jess, who is very much my mini-me. And then that's just a nice picture of me in my nice outfit. You can tell though, I'm wearing a rainbow hoodie for you guys today. I actually keep it pretty casual, but for the sake of a nice slide, I figured I'd put on a nice picture for once. But before I was Dr. DiNezza, again, some of you might know a little bit of my story, especially if you tuned in for my podcast with Amy Hollenkamp. But before I was Dr. DiNezza, I was very much in your guys' shoes. I had very bad IBS, particularly when I was in grad school. I look back and I think I probably had a variation of IBS going back. I was pretty constipated as a kid and as a teen, but it's one of those things, right? You don't really talk about poop with anybody else. So you only know what is normal for you. You don't realize that it's atypical until you interact with other people and you talk about poop with those other people. So in retrospect, I think I was pretty constipated for most of my childhood and young adulthood, but then the tables kind of went and flipped. And I was having chronic diarrhea, very bad chronic bloating. For those of you who saw my story in the email leading up to this webinar the other day, I did share that I've lived everybody's nightmare and I was actually asked if I was pregnant. That happened to me and I was mortified, as you would imagine. But also looking back, it's almost kind of comical in a weird way now. Because she was just, the woman was so excited for me. She was so genuinely thrilled. And I had to crush her and tell her, no, I was not pregnant. But that's another story for another day. But the point is I had very bad bloating, very bad diarrhea for a number of years. And the kicker was this was at kind of the beginning of the height of my functional medicine studies. I was going to seminars every weekend. I was learning everything I could about leaky gut and autoimmunity and the microbiome and supplements and herbs and vitamins, and I still felt like crap. And it was really deeply frustrating. And you can see these couple of Facebook memory posts from 2012. I would say the period of time where I was really working on this the most was probably 2009 to 2013, somewhere in that ballpark. But you can see on the right side, I'm asking, anyone have a good cauliflower recipe that doesn't have any grains, nightshades, nuts, dairy, soy, or egg in it? It's the size of my head. And yes, it is past Nikki. But also, my goodness gracious, that is a very restricted diet. I joke, I did AIP before it was called AIP. I did AIP before it was cool. Back in the day, I did this diet, this very restrictive allergen elimination diet, in conjunction with a supplement regimen that you can see there that I traveled with. One of them was called Repairvite. So at the time I called it the Repairvite diet, but basically it was AIP. And then similarly, look at the picture on the left there. Think it's too hard to eat healthy when you travel? Think again. Behold my temp kitchen. That one just came up on the memories yesterday, and I had to add it into the slides because I thought it was perfect. But I will share, and this is probably not a surprise to any of you. In retrospect, this post was a little bit, it was a little bit weird and humbling to find on my newsfeed again, or in my memory feed on Facebook, because I was not happy about traveling this way, right? Like, I wanted it to be this encouraging, like, if I could do it, you could do it too. And I wanted to show that it is possible. But in retrospect, it was really dysfunctional, and it was really quite sad and frustrating that I had to travel with not one, but two coolers, not one, but two blenders. I had the Vitamix to make my green smoothies, and I had the Magic Bullet to mix up all my nasty ass supplements. And then all of the different pills and potions and powders and supplements. And I think that's maybe almond milk there. And I probably had a whole arsenal of other like bottles of supplements and crap that I had with me in my bag. So, I was trying to make this an encouraging thing, but in retrospect, it actually made me really sad to see this memory, because I remember what it was like to travel like that. And apparently I wanted to be at least a teeny bit self-righteous about it. Like, it's not hard. If I can do it, you can do it too. And I just kind of want to hug past Nikki and say, oh, sweetie, oh, sweetie. But luckily, I do love a transformation story, particularly as it relates to anime. My all-time favorite, Sailor Moon. This was just my excuse to sneak in a Sailor Moon gif, to be quite honest. But really, I went from this, which you see here, to a person who has, I think, pretty good gut health, despite a lot of squirreliness in my health history. I have had truckloads of antibiotics in my history. I've definitely had things that should have set me up for a microbiome of despair for the rest of my life. But now I have zero bloating. I haven't had diarrhea. I don't even know since when, maybe 10 years since I've had diarrhea legitimately. I generally have pretty good bowel movements. I have no pain or cramping or intestinal woes. And I feel like I could eat most everything minus gluten and dairy. But in and amongst my healing journey, I did discover that I have celiac disease. So the gluten thing is just a no-go for me because of the celiac thing. And I found out along the way that my body also super hates dairy. And that's a whole nother story for another day. But I went from this and eating a very restricted diet and having to travel with pretty much a miniature kitchen to healing my gut to a point where I don't really think about my gut all that much on a day-to-day basis. But I'm curious if you guys would be willing to share in the feed here on Zoom, what would best describe your situation? And keep in mind, you can pick one or more than one if you would like to. But let me know, have you been diagnosed with IBS, SIBO, Candida? Have you hypothesized IBS or SIBO or Candida? Like what would best describe you guys? All right, we've got number one, we've got a SIBO. Okay, IBS and leaky gut. Number one, all right, we're seeing, okay, flatline SIBO test. It might indicate hydrogen sulfide. It's actually hard to say. That's not super substantiated in research, but flatline SIBO test was thought to indicate H2S SIBO perhaps. Okay, 2 and 3 are recent diagnoses for Annie. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, so it seems like we've got a pretty good smattering, particularly between IBS and SIBO, with a handful of people saying that they also have Candida. Let me see if I can see in the live stream on YouTube. Okay, I don't see anything as of yet. I'm going to try to check those comments too when I'm able to. Well, thank you for sharing that. I think that really helps me kind of frame the conversation that we're going to have. And it's just really helpful to know what you guys are struggling with and what we're here to talk about. Because honestly, my goals for this webinar don't actually matter. Yours do. So I would rather know what you're struggling with. And that's why I emailed you guys and said, hey, what are you looking forward to? What are you struggling with? I want to hear from you. I did read all of those emails, by the way. But moving on. I do just want, I put this in here as a reminder for me to tell you that you and your gut have the same goals. It might not always feel like that. And I realize probably most days it does not feel like that, but your gut wants to be healthy. Your gut wants to be able to enjoy yummy food. Your gut wants to nourish you. Your microbiome and your immune system want to protect you. Your body wants to be regulated and happy and healthy. It's just that your body is most likely dealing with a limited number of tools in the tool belt, or dealing with a very squirrely environment, whether that means locally in your body or in your home, in your work, in your life. It's your body is struggling to deal with something, or it's struggling to overcome something. And it doesn't mean that your body's out to get you. I know for me, when I had IBS, there was many, many times where I vividly remember looking down at my gut and thinking or saying out loud, why are you doing this to me? Why are you doing this to me? Why do you hate me? Why are you out to get me? Why don't you just cooperate? Why did you have to do this? This is so inconvenient. I hate you. Like, there was a lot of really nasty dialogue in my head and verbally when I had IBS. So I can imagine that some of you have probably found yourselves in a similar boat. But I do just want to remind you that you have the same goals as your gut and your immune system and your brain. And it's not that your gut is intentionally trying to make your life miserable. You just need to help it in whatever way it needs help. But going right into, no more fluff, no more prep work. Let's get into some of my favorite tips and tricks. Now, some of you guys did email these ahead of time. So when you sent in that email, I asked you what were some of your favorite tips and tricks for managing IBS in the holiday season and avoiding flare-ups. Some of these you guys came up with, some of them you did not. So I'll just share my kind of top 10, as it were. And this one actually dates back not to when I had IBS. This dates back further than that. So I had mentioned briefly that I did some restricted dieting before my IBS journey. And it's kind of comical for those of you who know my podcast and have tuned in for that, you might know the story. But basically, my mom, in an effort to get healthier and lose weight, side note, it didn't work, but that's another story. In an effort to get healthier and lose weight, one day when I was 11, my mom came home and said, Nick, I'm going to try to be a vegetarian for a while. Do you want to do it with me? And I was apparently the laziest child on planet Earth. I complained that meat was too hard to chew from a very young age. And when my mom said, hey, do you want to just not eat meat? I was game. I was like, okay, cool. And I'm so good with the flow. I was like, yeah, sure. So I became a vegetarian at the age of 11. And I maintained that diet until I was about 22 or 23, when I found out about the celiac disease and I started having more like IBS type symptoms. So I remained vegetarian for about a decade or 11 years of my life. And I just learned really early on in that process to plan ahead and have very low expectations. Because I was a vegetarian in the mid 90s through about, mid early 2000s. And it was a time frame where we had some veggie burgers and we had some like tofurkey kind of options, but there weren't a lot. It wasn't like it is now where you walk into the Wegmans or you walk into Sprouts or you walk into Whole Foods and there's a plethora of well-labeled options for you as a vegetarian. We really had like 2 brands of veggie burger and that was it. So for me, I remember if I ever went to a barbecue or a cookout or a birthday party or some sort of function where there was a meal, basically from a young age, I just learned I'm going to bring a veggie burger just in case. I'm going to automatically assume that these people cannot feed me and that they're going to have like burgers and brats. And I'm going to have like a weird potato chip dinner if I don't bring my own food. And that worked out really well. And honestly, most of the time when I did do that, people did not have food for me. And on occasion, every now and then, or if it was like a group of people that I knew really well, sometimes they actually did feed me and they did have a veggie burger prepared for me. But the point is, I never assumed that that would be the case unless I was explicitly told so ahead of time. So I just made a habit of making sure I always brought my own food. So that is one workaround, is that if you plan ahead and bring something with you or have really low expectations and not set yourself up for disappointment, I think that that can go a long way when you have a special diet. A lot of people just aren't going to get it. And that's okay. This is not their healing journey. It's not their job to get it. It's their job to not be an asshole to you if you do have special dietary needs, right? Like, you don't want to be the person who's like, oh, you have a peanut allergy? Here, have some peanut butter, Brenda. Like, you don't want to be that person. But it's also not necessarily their job to go above and beyond and cater to you. You've got to be somewhat self-sufficient. So anyway, plan ahead and have low expectations. And sorry, I am kind of managing email. Several people have emailed saying they didn't get the link for today, so I'm kind of going back and forth. Sorry for that if it feels a little fragmented. But yeah, so that's kind of a throwback to the good old days of me being a vegetarian. This one is pretty intuitive. A couple of you already mentioned this in the email back to me, but passing on or at least minimizing alcohol and carbonation can really help, especially if your primary symptom is gas bubbles and bloating. Then adding in gas bubbles and carbonation is going to make that potentially very much worse. I'm curious though, let me ask the group here. Do any of you have a reaction to alcohol that would elicit headaches or migraines or dizziness or heart palpitations or itchy skin rashes or hives? Any sort of reactions like that to alcohol specifically amongst the folks who are tuned in right now? And I'm going to toggle back over to YouTube and see if anybody has that on the YouTube comments. All right, I'm not seeing anything on YouTube and I'm not. Okay, Jesselyn said, my reaction to alcohol is an acute gastritis. Okay, that's a little different, I think. I was asking those questions about like headaches, migraines, itchy skin rashes, hives, that sort of stuff, because that type of reaction to alcohol can be related to histamine. And in which case, working on the antihistamine front and perhaps minimizing the other foods that you consume that contain histamine or taking a digestive enzyme that degrades histamine can actually help you tolerate a little bit more alcohol if you do want to indulge around the holidays. We had a couple of people last night on the webinar when I asked that question. Okay, Amy said only wine. You could explore the histamine thing and kind of research it a little bit more. For those of you who aren't familiar, I have a YouTube channel and I have a podcast, and I do have videos on both of those or episodes on both of those about mast cell activation and about histamine intolerance and the low histamine diet. I'm going to go ahead and give you guys the link. So the first link I'm giving you is to the YouTube channel for my podcast. And then the second one is for my YouTube channel itself. You can also look up my podcast, just look it up on a podcasting app. It's the IBS Freedom Podcast. But if you want to actually watch it on video and see Amy and I and see our mannerisms and our interactions, you can click on the YouTube link. But if you're curious about the histamine thing, it's a lot to get into for today, but that might help you flesh that out a little bit more for those of you who might have that issue. But for general IBS purposes or general kind of SIBO purposes, I think minimizing alcohol and minimizing carbonation is going to help control the bloating and make sure that you don't bloat up like a balloon. This one I strategically worded the way I did. Move when you can was very intentional on my part. So on the one hand, exercise is so good for your body. I mean, I could go on and on. I actually have a bachelor's degree in exercise science specifically. I mean, you are making new blood vessels and new capillaries when you exercise. You make new mitochondria, which help you make more energy and ultimately help you control inflammation. It builds better, stronger muscles. You trim away fat. You optimize your metabolism. You optimize hormone function. You optimize brain function. Movement and exercise are really stupendous for the human body. But say you're traveling and you just know that you're not going to exercise, right? Like you don't want to, you don't want to have to deal with finding a yoga studio where you're going to be, or you don't want to take the time away from your busy holiday schedule to actually exercise. What do you do then? Why don't you just move? And do anything, just move. Even if it's something as simple as like, oh yeah, I'll walk down to the other end of the yard and grab that for you, Mom, no problem. Or, oh, you need somebody to run over to the mailbox and get the mail for the day? Done. Okay, I'll be the one to walk down to the mailbox. Like as an easy example, for my parents, where they live, their mailbox, they're on a gravel road and their mailbox is a good like quarter of a mile away. So just walking to the mailbox and back, that's roughly about a half-mile walk that I wouldn't have gotten otherwise in my day. So volunteer yourself to do things that would necessitate a little bit more movement and just get your body moving, because A, it's incredibly healthy for you, but also it actually helps diversify your microbiome if you exercise, and it will help stimulate the brain in a good way. And that ultimately will facilitate the activation of your vagus nerve. The gut-brain connection is very, very important, especially for people with IBS and SIBO. And if you can induce some activity in your central nervous system, light up your brain with some movement and some exercise, you're going to facilitate better vagal tone and ultimately better digestion. So whether it be actual exercise or just moving your body in some other way, if you can move whenever humanly possible during your holidays, that will be so, so, so important. Eliana asks, is it true to avoid overtraining though, that high intensity exercise is bad when healing the gut? Depends on your definition. So as a general rule of thumb, like high intensity interval training or getting your heart rate up really high is not bad for the gut. No. If you legitimately overtrain yourself and you're really pushing yourself hard. So like as an example, I'm working with a woman right now. She has been very, very unwell. She had to take some time off of work even. And she finally got to a place where she's pooping every day, which is thrilling for her. And she's feeling a bit better otherwise. Like maybe she's had a big improvement in her gut function and maybe like a 10 or 20% improvement in like mood and energy and brain fog and that sort of stuff. And then she busts out and tells me, oh yeah, I'm trying to do Orange Theory 5 days a week. Like, girl, I've done Orange Theory before. It's intense. Maybe, and I told her as part of a recommendation for that week, I was like, maybe tone it back a bit. It's fantastic that you want to exercise. I love that you're exercising, but rein it in just a little bit. Maybe have a couple of days where you just go for a light jog, or you go for a nice long walk, or you do some yoga, or you do something else, but don't burn yourself into the ground for the sake of getting a good workout in, because I do think that overtraining truly can be very depleting for your body, for your nervous system, for your immune system, for your gut. So it really depends. If it's really overtraining, which kind of does happen, then I would be cautious of that. But as far as like getting your heart rate up nice and high and doing high intensity intervals, there is a way to do that and not totally burn yourself out. You can kind of gauge how burned out you feel and how exhausted you feel and how happy you are when you do the exercise. If you're doing exercise and you're miserable doing it, why are you doing it? Just point blank. Again, I have a bachelor's degree in exercise science, but why are you doing that to yourself? Pick something that you enjoy. Like if you don't like running, then probably don't run. For me, I do Fitness Marshall workout videos. For those of you who haven't discovered him, oh my God, you're missing out. If you look on YouTube for the Fitness Marshall, he's fantastic. It's hysterical, but he does these dance videos on YouTube to like current pop music. They're fantastic and they're a damn good exercise. And I've kind of had to let go of this idea that I have to be all about like optimizing my exercise and performance and hitting some metric or hitting some bar, because I was a rower in college and I was quite competitive in that. And trying to find a workout that works for me now in this phase of my life when I'm not a competitive rower was really challenging for me, but I kind of just hit a stride in the last year or two with that. Star says, walking, especially outside, has been huge for me. Yeah, that's the thing. You don't have to get fancy if you don't want to. If you want to do CrossFit, or if you want to do Orange Theory, or if you want to do something difficult, go for it. Just try not to overtrain yourself and burn yourself out. If you ever get to the point where you're dragging yourself to the gym, then you're probably burning yourself out, honestly. All right, moving on. I don't even know which one we're on. 4, 3, I don't know. This one is probably very intuitive to somebody who has diarrhea dominant symptoms for their IBS or their SIBO. But just as a quick note, if you are really stressed about a long drive, or if you're stressed being at somebody's house that you haven't been to before, or at a location where you haven't been, make an effort to map out the restrooms ahead of time. I know I used to do this when I had really bad IBSD. Just knowing where the bathrooms are ahead of time before the shit hits the fan, literally and figuratively, can go a really long way. So if you haven't thought of that already, do so. You can either ask the host as soon as you arrive at the party, hey, where's your restroom? And you could pretend. You could be like, hey, I have to pee. Where's your bathroom? And then you could just go like checking out the bathrooms if you want to. And if you're doing a long drive, maybe look at the map ahead of time and figure out where there's some rest stops that look nice, maybe a rest stop where you can get out and stretch your legs and move around and walk for a while. But you can plan out your trip and you can plan out your arrival at the party so that you get a chance to map out restrooms. This was also a strategy to kind of throw back to my days of being a vegetarian. Eating something before you go to the event seems counterintuitive, but it can be helpful because if you think about it, I'll flash back to when I was a vegetarian. If I didn't bring food with me and I went to this party and I arrived starving, and I get there, it's dinner time or it's past my dinner time. I arrive and I'm starving, and then I find out that they don't have food for me. It's going to suck a lot, right? Because I'm already in starvation mode. I'm already getting kind of hangry and brain foggy, maybe headachy. And then you're going to be more prone to making a choice out of desperation or making a choice that's not super rational. And you're just going to dive into the rolls or the pizza or whatever they have at that party. Versus, I found that if I kind of, again, lowered the expectations a lot, if I automatically assumed that these people were not going to be able to feed me, and I just set myself up to be really pleasantly surprised when it did happen, if I ate something before going and then I arrived and they had something I could eat, then great, I enjoy that food at the party. If I ate something ahead of time and I arrive and they have nothing for me to eat, no big deal. I can either get by on what I ate already, or I can make a rational choice to go to the grocery store, or, eat the granola bar in my purse, or call the friend who hasn't arrived at the party yet and ask them to stop by the grocery store on their way to the party and grab me something that I'm able to eat on their way here. You can start thinking through your plan B if you have a clear state of mind. But if you're all brain fogged out and crabby and hangry and headachy and feeling really gross, you're not going to have the mental capacity to think through a plan B. So keep that in mind. If you eat a little something before a big event, that can actually help curtail that issue. This is my favorite. And you can flesh this out in a number of different ways. But when I say pack rescue remedies, I don't mean like the Bach flower essence rescue remedy. I know that there's a proprietary brand name product called Rescue Remedy. That's not what I'm talking about. What I mean is pack something that will help curtail symptoms in the event that you have symptoms. So as an example, again, I shared, I have celiac disease. My body is still pretty sensitive to gluten, although it's gotten better over the years. But still, if I get like cross-contamination at a restaurant, I will oftentimes get a headache. I will always get low back pain. That was actually one of my wacky symptoms that went away, was when I worked on my gut and I healed my leaky gut and I cut out gluten and figured out my IBS. I had chronic low back pain for 5 years and it vanished. And to this day, 12 years later, if I get glutenated, I get low back pain in the exact same location, the same joint, the same everything. Everything is the same. It's really wild. But the point is that my body still does not appreciate gluten, and it probably never will, to the best of my knowledge. So what do? She says as she fumbles to open her purse. Hold on. So personally, I was in my purse anyway. So personally, I carry a little container like this. It's just a teeny weeny little Tupperware. And inside I keep a little mixture of digestive enzymes and ibuprofen, because you never know when you're going to need an ibuprofen. But I pack digestive enzymes and I carry them everywhere I go. They're always in my purse or my fanny pack. If I'm rocking the fanny pack, I carry those with me. And if I travel, if I'm going to a friend's house, if I'm going to a relative's, I might bring even more than that, because it's a nice little insurance policy to help me bind up and digest that little bit of gluten more adequately. So that way, if I slip up and something gets past my radar, no big deal. That should help curtail at least some of the damage. I actually had a situation where I was at a restaurant, I'll never forget it, in San Diego, California. I was in an IFM conference of all the things in the world. I was at a functional medicine conference, and my best friend and I, who met up to go with me to the conference, we were at a restaurant a little ways down the road. We both ordered the catch of the day. I had to have asked this waiter no less than 8,000 times, no, like 4 times, is it gluten-free? What does it come with? And he said, it comes with quinoa. Don't worry, it's gluten-free. I assure you it's gluten-free. I was like, you sure? There's no soy sauce. There's no butter. There's no weird shit in the quinoa. No, it's gluten-free. Don't worry, lady. So I ordered the catch of the day with quinoa. He brings out the plates. Mamie and I were starving. So again, going back to don't let yourself get into starvation mode, because then weird things happen. I was totally starving and we were so happy to see each other. We were just shooting the shit and we were gabbing at each other the whole time. We didn't pay attention and we immediately started eating. I ate a big spoonful of the quinoa. You can sense where I'm going with this, right? I ate a big spoonful of the quinoa, shoveled it in my mouth, swallowed it, looked down at my plate, and quickly realized, that is quinoa plus something else. And I don't know what the something else is. I know what rice looks like. I know what oats look like. I know what quinoa looks like, and millet, and it ain't any of those things. Long story short, after numerous back and forth exchanges with the waiter that were deeply frustrating, it turns out it was farro, which is totally gluten. Oh my goodness. I ate about 50% of a heaping tablespoon of pure gluten grain. And I panicked. And I thought, oh my God, I'm flying tomorrow. I'm going to look pregnant and I'm going to have wicked diarrhea on an airplane toilet, which is the least ideal situation, in my opinion. I'm going to have diarrhea on an airplane toilet. I'm going to be hogging the bathroom and stinking it up so that anybody who goes in after me is going to regret the day they were born. And I'm going to be pregnant and I'm going to be miserable and in pain and cramping. And I have a cross-country flight to go back from San Diego to North Carolina. Oh my God. So what did I do though? I busted out these bad boys. I probably shoved 8 of these enzymes in my face all at once because I was like, whatever, we're doing it. This is Mayday, code red, red alert. And I'll tell you what, it didn't totally get me off the hook, but those digestive enzymes helped curtail probably 90% of the damage that I would have otherwise had. I think I maybe had one loose-ish poo. It wasn't diarrhea. It was just a little bit loose. And I don't remember having a profound amount of bloating or pain, which is huge for me. And I did get back pain, not surprisingly. But digestive enzymes, being prepared for the worst, if it does happen, can go a long way. Another thought is ginger. For those of you who followed my YouTube channel for a while, you're going to roll your eyes at this because I talk about ginger all the time, but honest to God, it's so good. Ginger is such a simple and effective thing for managing gut flare-ups. It's an anti-inflammatory, it's a prokinetic, it helps with regulating the microbiome, it's an antispasmodic, it is so good. And if you're in a pinch, like I was once upon a time, I was traveling at a conference, I got glutenated. I didn't have any of my supplements with me. I didn't even have enzymes, but I was near a grocery store. I marched my little butt to the grocery store. I grabbed a hunk of fresh ginger, brought it back to my hotel room. I peeled it with the crappy little spoon in my hotel room. I chopped it up with the crappy little knife that they had in the hotel room. And I made ginger tea. And I chopped it up real fine and threw it in a mug of boiling water. It saved my ass. This was a different seminar. This was 2 years prior. But ginger and sipping on that ginger tea really helped curtail a lot of the damage that I would have otherwise experienced and a lot of the symptoms that I would have otherwise experienced. So ginger can be a great one, either in capsules or a tea. And then last but not least, if you know that your body is really prone to food sensitivities, or I'm sorry, not the food sensitivity, the enzymes would help with that probably too. But if you know that you're really prone to food poisoning, you could bring things with you like activated charcoal or kaopectate or, bismuth, any sort of binder agent that will help bind up some of those bacterial toxins and get them out of your body ASAP. That can go a long way. I remember I did work with somebody once and she was saying, and I've heard similar things from other people, but I remember this one woman was saying, man, I swear my body is more susceptible to food poisoning. And as a side note, she had the post-infectious type of SIBO. So food poisoning was her root cause for SIBO. But with her, she was like, my significant other and I can eat the same food from the same plate, from the same restaurant, the same time, and I will get food poisoning and she will not. What gives? And I think that after you've had food poisoning a time or 2 or 3 or 4 or 10, your body can be more susceptible to that inflammatory stimuli and you can go kind of off the rails much easier. So for those people, bringing things like activated charcoal and kaopectate and binders can go a really long way. And I'm going to check on the comments because I know we have a couple questions. What enzyme supplement do I recommend? What enzyme supplement do I use? So for me, the one that I tend to use is called gluten-flam. I'm going to write that in the chat box. So it's gluten-flam, like inflammation. Is how it's supposed to be, but it's the one that I usually use is called gluten-flam from Apex Energetics. There's others. As long as it has some sort of digestive enzyme for gluten, it would probably work fine for somebody like me. So there's a product called Wheat Rescue from Microbiome Labs. I believe Enzymedica has one that has DPP4. A lot of digestive enzymes, I think, do the job in that situation. I just happened to gravitate towards gluten flame because that was kind of the first one that I had done. If you react to other foods, will enzymes help? Possibly. If you think that your reaction is a food sensitivity, yes. If you think that it's a food intolerance, like a FODMAP intolerance or a histamine intolerance, maybe, maybe not. You have to get really granular with that. Microbiome Labs did just come out with an enzyme for FODMAP specifically. I have no experience with it. I probably won't have much experience with it for quite some time because honestly, I'm more in the game of helping people tolerate the FODMAPs again, and then you don't have to worry about the damn enzymes. But there is theoretically an enzyme on the market specifically for FODMAPs, and there is one called DAO for histamine. So if it's an intolerance like those two things, you would have to pick it based on the type of intolerance you think you have. If you have more like food sensitivity type reactions, then quite possibly. I have a food sensitivity, not a lactose intolerance to dairy, and it does seem like the enzymes help with that as well. So yeah, I think that could be useful. Eliana says, any other supplements we should have in the emergency kit for SIBO D? Again, it kind of depends on your root cause and what sort of stuff you struggle with. If you have a lot of bloating, I would certainly consider ginger. There's a number of different teas that I like. Actually, I did a reel video on Instagram. Let me find it and I'll just show it to you briefly. Not the whole video because you're not going to be able to read it backwards anyway, but hold on. Okay, if you go on my Instagram, my Instagram is at Triangle Guts because I'm in the Triangle of North Carolina. But if you go back, way back, hold on. Okay, it looks really boring, but bear with me. If you scroll way down, it's this one. It looks like just a really boring gray background right there. If you click on it, I'm basically going through different supplements and laying them down, and then I talk about it in the description. But there's a number of things in that reel that I shared. There's some essential oil blends that I really like that you can apply topically on your tummy. Ginger, again, I'm a big fan. There are some herbal teas that come in like little tea bags that you can travel with that are very travel friendly. You could get ginger in capsules, or you could do something like enteric-coated peppermint oil. It really depends what your symptoms primarily are. If your symptoms primarily manifest as bloating, diarrhea, constipation, pain, and what your root cause is. So for, like I've said, the woman who had the post-infectious SIBO, we just knew that her body was going to be more susceptible to food poisoning and the inflammation that goes with that. So for her, having things to curtail that food poisoning type reaction was really clutch for her situation. Let's see. This one was pretty intuitive. A few of you had emailed and said that you came up with this one already too, but just as a general rule of thumb with IBS, try not to overstuff yourself. I know that goes against the American way. It is the American way to stuff ourselves until food is squirting out our ears. But if you have IBS and your stomach and your intestines already have a hard time processing your food, it could be a double whammy of awfulness if you then over consume said food and then you're stuffed to the gills and your poor stomach doesn't have the space to process it. So making sure that you stop shy of totally stuffed is really important. And it's worth mentioning since Thanksgiving is the primary time of year that we do this. I think if I remember correctly, I know Michael Pollan talks about it in some of his books, but there are sayings in a lot of different languages that basically communicate this in a more eloquent way. I think in Japanese it was harahachebu, which basically means eat until you're 80% full. So for what it's worth, think about that and maybe stop a little bit shy of what you normally would. And remember, it takes about 20 minutes for your brain to register where you're at as far as fullness goes. So this comes into play when you're eating too quickly or if you're not being mindful. But it's very easy to eat well past your full point if you're really distracted, or if you're eating super, super quickly Because if you're scarfing all your food in 5 or 10 minutes, by the time the fullness cue hits you, it's well after your meal, and then it's too late. So slowing down and really enjoying your food, really chewing your food, and giving yourself that space to react when your body says, okay, I'm full, enough's enough, is really important here. Okay, fiber. Oh, as a microbiome nerd, I'm going to throw out there, fiber is super duper ultra mega important. And it can be a little hard to come by on these restricted diets, particularly low FODMAP, but also AIP. When I was doing Repair Bite, I guarantee I was not getting enough fiber or enough variety. I think that this can happen with a myriad of diets, keto as well. So making sure that you focus on the fiber that you're able to consume. Now, that being said, I realize that getting enough fiber on low FODMAP can be tricky. So I've actually prepared a whole list of low FODMAP friendly fibers, both in food and supplement form, that I'm going to give you in just a few minutes. But just take my word for it. Getting your fiber where you can is really important. The microbiome can shift within 2 days of making a dietary change, which is both profoundly encouraging and profoundly depressing, right? Because like, on the one hand, cool, if you decide today to make a dietary change, you will have a different microbiome in 2 days. How cool is that? But also, if you go off the rails and you eat nothing but Pop-Tarts for the next 2 days, your microbiome is going to be in pretty rough shape 2 days from now. So it's a blessing and a curse. What I would say is that if you can try to get fiber at most of your meals and try to ensure adequate fiber intake on a day-to-day, then if you have a party or a potluck or an event where you're going and maybe you don't have as many fiber options at that event, and maybe you fill up more on things like turkey or the roast, and you have fewer vegetables and fruits, it's not as big of a deal. Having one meal or one afternoon where you don't get enough fiber is not going to be a deal breaker. But if you're on vacation, you're living La Vida Loca, you're overindulging in sweets and you're getting less fiber than normal for the duration of the holiday or the duration of the break, then that's where things can get swirly real quick. So making sure that you can consume the fiber that you're able to tolerate and giving your microbiome that fuel can be really, really important. Let's see. Jamie said, my problem is not eating enough because I'm full after 2 bites. Okay. May I ask, Jamie, have you been diagnosed with any sort of motility disorder or gastroparesis or delayed stomach emptying? Because that sounds like a delayed stomach emptying issue, if I had to guess. Maybe to the overt direction of gastroparesis. Let's see if Jamie can respond. Well, while I'm waiting. Oh, no, but yes, I feel like I've lost motility. Okay. Think about ginger for one. Or any sort of prokinetics. For those of you who are not familiar with my YouTube channel, I'll put the link in the description thingy again. But on that YouTube channel, if you search for the word prokinetic, you're going to find I did a video in summer last year, summer 2020, I think, where I talked about the best prokinetics for IBS and SIBO. And it's actually data-based. I actually have been essentially using my patients as guinea pigs for a number of years with their consent. And I've been collecting data on which prokinetics work the most and the most frequently for people with IBS and SIBO. And the results were pretty compelling. So I would consider prokinetics for that. But it sounds like probably you have some degree of delayed stomach emptying, maybe to the degree of gastroparesis. But either way, a prokinetic should help you quite a lot. And Jamie, you probably need to focus a lot on your gut-brain axis. If you're not already familiar with the vagus nerve and nurturing that, you definitely want to check out those episodes on my YouTube channel and also those episodes on the podcast. So I'm going to put the podcast link down here as well. Make sure that you become very, very familiar with the vagus nerve and the gut-brain axis and focus on those episodes that we've given you there. Let's see. What are your thoughts on lentils and beans? Most days I could digest them, but sometimes I bloat. Maybe your bloat is not related to that food then. When I hear stuff like that, where it's like one day you tolerate a food and the next day you seem to not tolerate the food, my first thought is maybe it's not the food. The other thing is there are some food patterns like histamine intolerance where you can get kind of a buildup of that product, and then you can kind of get a really crappy crescendo. So like if you, for example, if you're really histamine intolerant and you are very good and very strict for a week with no histamine intake whatsoever, in theory, if you have zero histamine intake, you will have facilitated the removal. You'll get it out of your body, you'll process it, and then your tolerance for it, your window of tolerance will be that much better. So then if you go about that week eating no histamine, and then you have some wine or you have some tomato sauce, the likelihood that you'll tolerate it actually is much better. But with histamine, if you have some medium or high histamine foods every day, every meal, all the time, and then you have a mega histamine load, the likelihood that you're going to overfill that bucket and it's going to happen to cause you symptoms is much higher. So that's a consideration too, is that there are some patterns like histamine where it's like a buildup over days or weeks. Other foods like FODMAPs and fiber and food sensitivities, that doesn't seem to happen as much. But my first kind of thought is that you might not, it might not be the beans and lentils. So I would investigate that probably first. But I'm a big fan of beans and lentils, nutritionally speaking, as long as you can tolerate them. Let's see. Jamie said, "Thank you so much. You're amazing." Shucks, darling. You too. But you're so welcome. Honestly, I'm happy to help. Hold on. It scrolled. If you already have multiple BMs a day, SIBO D, do you still need a prokinetic? One of my favorite questions. Try it out. You would be surprised. Prokinetics, more often than not, seem to normalize bowel movement patterns rather than being intrinsically stimulating. So like laxatives are always facilitating removal. They are always stimulating. Prokinetics are normalizing. So I have had many patients with constipation who have more frequent, better bowel movements when they start a prokinetic. And I have had many patients with diarrhea who start a prokinetic and they say that it helps firm up their bowel movements or it helps them have fewer bowel movements. So yes, you could very much still benefit from a prokinetic, more than likely. Check out that video. For those of you, let's see, then Stacy said, "Can you please add the links to the podcast here?" Yes. So the podcast, and I don't know how many of you can see the chat box. If you're on the PC, you really should be able to see it if you pop open the chat box. If you're on your phone, you might not be able to see it. So I'll just verbally share. My podcast is the IBS Freedom Podcast. I do that with Amy Hollenkamp. She's a registered dietitian. We both specialize in helping people with IBS and SIBO. So a lot of our focus is around IBS and SIBO, but we do make mention of things like GERD, gastritis, IBD, that sort of stuff as well. We tend to talk a lot about the microbiome and about the gut-brain axis, but most of it is from the angle of either IBS or SIBO or both. We have, I think, 62 episodes now on the podcast. You can watch them on YouTube, which is the link I just provided, or you can listen to it on a regular old podcasting app and listen to it audio only. And then for those of you who don't know, my YouTube channel, which is where the prokinetic video is Triangle Holistic Gut Health. Again, I'm in the triangle of North Carolina, so that's why I named it that, because I'm in the triangle. Let's see. Annie says, "How to slowly tolerate more fiber. Doing 2 months of low FODMAP with antimicrobials and ginger tea daily." Yeah. Well, it sounds like you've got some good stuff on board. The big thing is to just slowly increase. And actually, if you haven't already, check out the podcast. I forget what number it was, but Amy and I did an entire episode all about food reintroduction strategy and how to reintroduce things and like what to expect, what is normal, what's abnormal. So you'll definitely want to check that out, Annie. So go ahead and check out the IBS Freedom Podcast. We're up to episode 62 now. I'm going to ballpark that episode is somewhere in the 30s or 40s, but I can't swear to that. Allie says, "I've started breaking out and having crazy amounts of oil all over my body. I think it's because of my gut issues. Do you think I'm lacking an enzyme like lipase, or is it safe for me to go on Accutane?" I can't weigh in about Accutane. I don't know. I've heard some not stellar things about Accutane, so I'd probably be a little reluctant. That being said, I'm not a prescriber, so I can't really speak to the benefit and risk of any prescription medication. It could be related to gut, it could be related to hormones. I don't know about lipase. That's the sort of thing that you might just want to get tested with either stool testing or blood work and evaluate enzyme levels, to be honest. I haven't seen that correlate. What I will share, you said a lot of oil. If it's manifesting as acne, I have seen many people, not everybody, but I've seen many people do very well reducing acne when they cut dairy out of their diet. All dairy, not just lactose. So that might be something for you to consider as well. Okay, then we just got a big one. All right, Wendy, I'm going to come back to your comment in a minute. I want to get through the other tips though. So for people who need to get off the call right at 1 o'clock. So I'm going to come back to your question, Wendy. So I see it's a big one, but I want to give us the space to cover the last couple of tips. Okay, so going back to the original purpose of the webinar, admittedly, I joke, I'm touched by a little bit of ADHD, so it's a little easy for me to get sidetracked and just chit-chatting with you guys, which I love, but I do want to finish these up real quick. This was another strategy that I personally like to implement when I can, but just offering to help cook will accomplish 2 goals. Number 1, it will make you seem like the nicest, most helpful, wonderful person. And maybe you are in your heart of hearts. Maybe you're an Enneagram 9 like me, or an Enneagram 2, and you're just really genuinely helpful as a person. But even if you don't feel like helping, if you can muster the ability to help cook the Thanksgiving meal or the Christmas meal, or whatever it might be, if you can help cook, that puts you in a really good standing with the host of the party. And several of you, when you emailed me with feedback before this webinar, was, 9-wing 1. I'm a 9-wing 8. We could talk about my 8-wing all day. How funny, Jamie. Too funny. So anyhow, a lot of you, when you emailed me about what you're worried about coming up this holiday season or what you're struggling with, a lot of you said that you dreaded being that girl or that person. You didn't want to be a nudge. You didn't want to be like the needy person who can't eat gluten, and you were worried that people would judge you. One workaround for that is if you go a bit above and beyond to be really helpful and to help prepare the meal, that'll put you in really good standing automatically with the host. If you can be helpful and courteous and wonderful, then they're probably not going to mind you asking about the ingredients. But the other bonus is that you won't have to ask about ingredients if you're the one cooking the food. So how fun is that? You will automatically know what is going into all the dishes because you're going to see all of the dishes being prepared. And that is some sneaky ass detective work that I can get behind. So that's an added bonus. And also, I'll throw this out too. If you offer to help cook ahead of time and you make it known that you're going to help, you possibly would gain some standing with the host, and maybe, just maybe, they would be cool enough to let you influence the recipes that are made that day. So if you offer to help cook and you're asking, hey, what's the menu? What are we going to be preparing? And they say, for example, cranberry sauce. You could possibly say, hey, you know what? I found this really great cranberry sauce that looked amazing. Do you mind if we use my recipe? And they might just say yes. And I'll show you kind of the relevance of that because I've actually prepared a whole boatload of low FODMAP holiday recipes for you guys. That's part of the gift that I'm giving you at the end. So stay tuned, but I actually compiled a lot of holiday recipes. And I found there was, I believe it was directly from Monash University, there was a low FODMAP cranberry sauce recipe that I put in there for you too. So just a thought, automatic good standing with the host. You already get to creep on all the ingredients going into the food, and you might get to help dictate what food gets prepared and what recipe gets used. So sneaky business, but helping cook can go a really long way. And then I think we're gearing up. I think this is the second to last one, if I remember correctly. If you can enlist the help of a buddy, that can also go a long way. If you think about it, if you go to a holiday get together with 10 people total, including you, odds are there's at least one other person at that party who has IBS, right? Like IBS afflicts about 20% of the population. So 2 people out of 10, if you're one of the people, there's automatically going to be one other person with IBS at that party of 10 people. So why not put out your feelers just a little bit? Talk to your cool cousin, Sarah. Talk to your awesome Aunt Sue. Talk to grandma, whoever. talk to people and kind of put out your feelers and see if there's anybody who, maybe your Aunt Sue recently went gluten-free because she found out she had a thyroid condition and maybe she's overwhelmed and freaked out about it, and you could help her and she could help you. But having a buddy can make you feel like less of a freak, which goes a long way. It makes it easier to talk to the host or talk to the chef about what the ingredients are, because now it's not just you being the weirdo. Side note, it's not you being a weirdo, but I know it feels that way. It's not just you being a nudge. It's you and your cousin or you and your aunt. Now you have a little group, you have a little pod that is asking about the ingredients. So it takes some of the pressure and some of the spotlight off of you in that situation, which I think is really helpful. And you guys can keep an eye out for each other. Like, oh, whoa, don't eat that. I'm pretty sure they put dairy in that. Or, oh, just so you know, I think this one's safe. Come on, let's go get a big serving before Uncle Bob hogs all of the whatever it is, because they can help you kind of scout out the foods that are safe and not safe. I kind of play buddy with my mom, honest to God, not because she wants me to, but for whatever reason, my mom similarly can't do gluten or dairy. We're twinsies, but she's fairly mindful about the gluten thing, but sometimes she has a brain fart when it comes to dairy. And she's like me. It's not a lactose thing for the two of us. It's a food sensitivity, our bodies get pissed kind of reaction. It flares up our autoimmunity. So for her, I'm constantly checking labels and I'm constantly checking recipes and I'm letting her know, oh, hey, this isn't safe. Or like, I remember one time she got like one of those instant gravy kind of packets and it said it was gluten-free. So she thought, we're good. Boatload of dairy. It had like powdered buttermilk in it. So I had to be the one to show her, Ma, nah, we can't have this. It's dairy. And then she's like, oh, okay. Another thing, I have a million of these with my mom, but another one, we got very excited as a family when Ben and Jerry's came out with dairy-free options. Very excited. And she got one, I forget which flavor it was, but she got a dairy-free Ben and Jerry's ice cream. She got a pint, brought it home. And I was looking at the label because I was suspicious of the one she got because it had like brownie bites in it, not gluten-free. So we ended up giving that one to my dad and choosing a different one for us. So having a buddy in the process can actually be really helpful. You just have to kind of scout them out. But like I said, IBS alone, let alone autoimmunity, celiac disease, Crohn's, colitis, GERD, IBS all by itself affects about 20% of the population. So there's a likelihood that at any party you go to, there's at least one other person who's dealing with the same shit, pun intended, that you're dealing with. So find them, make friends, make a buddy. And then this, I think, is really important too. Enjoy the food that you can eat and don't guilt yourself over it. We have enough nasty internal dialogue. Like I said, when I had IBS, I had a lot of that dialogue of like, why aren't you cooperating? I hate you. Why are you doing this to me? At my gut. And similarly, we live in a society that is so riddled with disordered eating, and we demonize sugar and we demonize grains and we demonize everything. Don't sweat the little stuff. If you know symptomatically that you could eat a cookie and it's not going to do a damn thing to you, then eat the cookie. Don't stress about, oh, I'm feeding the whatever it is. Live in the moment, enjoy the damn cookie. It's the holidays, for crying out loud. Similarly, if you know that like the cookie would destroy you because of the gluten, but you could eat gummy worms. I don't know why you would, but let's say gummy worms. Then enjoy the damn gummy worms. Don't eat the gummy worm and then internally be like, I shouldn't be eating this. It's sugar. I'm feeding the candida. I'm probably going to be stuck with IBS forever. Oh my God, I can't believe you're eating the gummy worm. No, don't go get another one. Oh my God, don't even. Like, just tell that voice in your head to shut up and enjoy the damn gummy worm. And I'm going to share this. Those of you who follow my podcast are going to laugh at this. I keep a giant bar of chocolate in my office because sometimes Mama wants sugar. Sometimes I want chocolate, and there's no ifs, ands, and buts. I do not beat myself up for eating this. I don't worry about, oh, you still have 10 pounds of COVID weight to lose. No, I just eat the chocolate and I live my damn life. So I encourage you to do the same. If there's something that you know is going to destroy you, if you know for sure that the cookies are going to, destroy, like for me, like gluten. I'm not going to eat a regular cookie or a regular piece of cake because I'm not dumb. And I know that the gluten is definitely going to F me up. But can I eat chocolate or sugary cranberry sauce or some alcohol or some other sugar? Totally. And I go for it, and I try to not live with regret doing so. So enjoy the junk that you can eat. Eliana says, okay, I officially want to be your best friend. Well, maybe I should open up applications. No, my actual best friend would be pissed, but we can be internet besties. How about that? But there's all sorts of fun ways that we can connect. So whether it be, you know, sending in questions for the podcast when we do Q&As, follow me on Instagram, we could be internet besties. How about that? And then last but not least, I think this was actually number 11. I threw this in there for good times. Just remember to have fun. It's the holidays. It only comes around once a year. It's wonderful and enchanting and magical. And by God, have fun. That's why eat your giant chocolate bar or whatever it might be, the gummy worms. But just remember to have fun. Human connection, connecting with other humans, connecting with animals, connecting with nature, connecting with the world around you, and just having fun gets the oxytocin flowing. It gets the dopamine and the serotonin and the feel-good neurochemistry going. And then guess what that does? Well, A, it makes you feel happy, but B, it facilitates vagal tone. It connects the gut-brain axis. And then guess what? If you're having fun and you're laughing and smiling and connecting with other people and you're living your damn life, your IBS is going to chill the fuck out. So have fun, laugh, smile, be ridiculous, be silly, enjoy some sugar. Do not live in fear of all sugar. It's not that any food is intrinsically evil. It's just that you have to help your body kind of tolerate what it can tolerate. But don't forget to have fun. Again, it's the holidays, for crying out loud. Live it up, man. I think if the COVID pandemic taught us anything, it's that life is too damn short. Live your life, eat the chocolate. But this is what I was talking about. So for those of you who wanted to know more about the goodies, the gift that I promised, here you go. So if you type into your browser, fodmapfreedom.com/holiday-goodies, I'll show you a little bit. So this is the page that I've set up. So you can see I've given you the low FODMAP fiber sources. It's a printable guide. You can just print that off and have that in your little pocket. The low FODMAP recipe collection is a Pinterest board I made for you guys. I'll show you that in just 1 minute. I gave you a video and a printable guide for what to do in case of gluten. Side note, if you have sensitivities other than gluten, it would probably work similarly for those too. That's been my experience at least. And then a video and a printable guide about what to do in case of food poisoning. And I think there's one more that didn't show up on the screen capture. So go ahead, go through all these resources, enjoy them. I try to build up some goodies that would make sense in light of what we talked about today. The Pinterest collection, I did not write any of these recipes, but I curated them. And those are all on Pinterest for you. I think there's 89 different recipes that I've saved in that board and counting. I'll probably add more in the coming weeks. But if you want some low FODMAP friendly holiday recipes, including the Monash cranberry sauce, absolutely have at it. And then for those of you asking what the link is, it's right here. And then I'm going to put that in, hold on. I'll put it in the chat box. So if you don't want to spell that sucker out to the bitter end, you don't have to. And I'm going to put it in the chat on the YouTube live stream as well. But yep, you got all sorts of goodies. And then I will stay on for a little bit here and answer some questions. So let me scroll back up because I know Wendy had what looked like a biggie. So I'm going to go back up to Wendy's comment. So she had said, and this was about 10 or 12 minutes ago. So Wendy, I hope you're still on. Wendy says, bloat all the time, no wheat, dairy, soy, alcohol, red meat, pork, eggs, caffeine, or chocolate for 3 months on an elimination food plan via IFM. Provider recommendation. Used GI detox and enzymes for 1 month, lost 10 pounds and much of bloat, not all. Okay. Started introducing chocolate. Seems good. Yes. A little dairy here and there. Bloat all the time. Okay. Never had an issue with BMs every day, at a loss, and recently menopausal. Feel like this is against me. Okay. Lot to unpack. So first of all, hormones do play a pretty big role in gut function. we have an episode on the IBS Freedom podcast, and I have some recent videos actually on my YouTube channel talking about the hormone gut connection. I have quite a few episodes now about estrogen and female hormones, so you might want to check those out. That's worth your consideration. Again, you might also want to check out that episode from the IBS Freedom podcast where we talk about food reintroduction strategy and what to expect, what is normal, what's abnormal. I think that could help you navigate. Let's see. That sounds like a pretty restricted diet. You might also have inadvertently dropped down your fiber consumption depending on how you've modified your diet, because when people cut out wheat, oftentimes that does create some dysbiosis, at least in the interim, because you're cutting out a big fiber source. So a couple of things I would look at. I would look at upping your fiber potentially, looking at the hormone episodes from either the IBS Freedom podcast or my YouTube channel, Triangle Guts, Triangle Holistic Gut Health, rather. And if you're getting bloated with dairy, but you can tolerate a little bit here and there, you might be lactose intolerant. So you might want to do a lactase-based enzyme. So hopefully that helped. Let's see. Scroll down a little bit. Nicole, who spells their name with an H. I am in the other camp. I do not spell Nicole with an H, but that's okay. I'm not going to judge. Nicole with an H says, I have not been diagnosed with histamine disorders, but I assume that I do. My list of reactions is growing. I have low thyroid, adrenal fatigue, PCOS, and IBS. I feel like this is very gut related. Yes and no. I think that it's a two-way street. Low thyroid function. So first of all, hormones talk to other hormones. So thyroid hormones and adrenal hormones and sex hormones and insulin, which is a hormone that regulates blood sugar. All of the hormones in your body talk to each other all day, every day. So it's very much an interwoven web. It's hard to say what you would have to tackle first. You may or may not have a histamine issue. None of those is exceptionally well correlated with histamine specifically. But yeah, I think it's worth unpacking. Certainly polycystic ovary syndrome is associated with dysbiosis for sure. I don't know if it's associated with IBS or SIBO necessarily, but it's very much associated with dysbiosis and lack of diversity in the microbiome. Adrenal fatigue, you might want to look at the gut-brain axis episodes on the IBS Freedom podcast and my YouTube channel as well. And then low thyroid, you'll probably want to address that directly. And it might be that you need a thyroid medication for a short period of time to kind of overcome the hump. It's hard to say without knowing your labs, but hopefully that gives you some framework to go off of. And then look at us commenting on the Enneagram. We've got Enneagram 9 Wing 1, Enneagram 2. Our Enneagram 2 said, yes, and bring your own compliant dessert that you can enjoy. Yep. What is my opinion about Everlywell food sensitivity tests? They are garbage. Do not waste your money. Nuh-uh. If you see a test like that, any of the tests that are just purely IgG, so like Genova Diagnostics has one, US Biotech has one. Any of those tests that are purely IgG are garbage. They're not worth the money that the paper was printed on. You might consider, there's combo tests. So like Cyrex, it's spelled Cyrex, is the one that I tend to use, but I will throw this out. I'm not a humongous fan of food sensitivity tests nowadays, even though they really helped me initially. What I've noticed is if you run a food sensitivity test, any test, when your gut is super, super inflamed and super pissed off and super leaky and you have wicked dysbiosis, the likelihood is that you're going to get a lot of false positives. So you might want to wait until you're able to patch up the gut a little bit, even if you make like 10% progress or 20% progress, and then you could get more into a fine-tuning stage with the food sensitivity tests. But I've just noticed back in the day, if I ran a food sensitivity test right out the gates, and it was one of the first things that I did with a person, I almost always saw it come back with a lot of foods that ultimately we were able to prove were false positives. So I don't know if you all are in the place to get that done quite yet. Rebecca said, thank you for encouraging us to be fun and be around people. I needed that. You are welcome. It's the holidays. You got to live it up. And that's in part, I think, why I keep it real low key on these webinars and on the podcast and YouTube. life's too short to be stuffy. I have to be a goofball. Georgiana, can you show the link again? Yes, I can. It's already there. Let's see. Thoughts on sugar with Candida. Doing 0 sugar at the moment, will be 3 months by Christmas. Good question, Annie. Candida does like sugar more so than SIBO, more so than other stuff. What you want to be most mindful of is processed sugar and table sugar. Those are your big culprits. Fruit, fructose. Candida don't give a rat's ass about fructose. You could eat fructose till the cows come home and Candida won't even blink at it. So you could most likely have fruit-based sugar, or you could even probably have some of the higher fructose sweeteners like agave nectar and be fine. But beware of table sugar and processed sugar. That is what Candida does seem to genuinely enjoy. Eliana says, how to know whether FODMAP freedom or digestion reboot is the right course for me? Depends on the gravity of what you're dealing with. So FODMAP freedom, for those of you who don't know, the URL is because I have a course named FODMAP freedom in 90 days. It is a 3-month intensive curriculum. I walk you through bit by bit. We do a live Q&A every single week. There's a lot more hand-holding in FODMAP freedom, and it's a much bigger curriculum. We cover a lot of stuff, everything from gut-brain axis to SIBO to Candida, antimicrobials, prokinetics, digestive enzymes, histamine, hormones, detoxification, you name it, we cover it as it pertains to your gut. So FODMAP freedom is the big one. And that I only enroll it twice a year, but that one is the big Mac Daddy of them all, as far as I'm concerned. Digestion Reboot is a little one. It's a little mini course. It's about 2 hours long, maybe 3 hours. And I basically walk you through a bit of a primer on the gut-brain axis, a bit of a primer on digestive enzymes and how to select the best digestive enzyme for you. And then we talk quite a bit about diversity, why it matters, and how you can up your microbial diversity. A lot of people do get good results with Digestion Reboot. I would just say if you have a particularly, and I put this in air quotes, if you have a tough case of IBS or SIBO, or if you feel like you've tried a lot of different stuff, you might want to hold out until we're enrolling FODMAP freedom again, because that is the much more comprehensive curriculum. Rebecca says, well, thank you for the information. Very helpful. You're welcome. Katie says, thank you. You are also welcome. Wendy says, yes, I will for sure. Thank you. You're also welcome. I feel like Oprah right now, like a car for you and a car for you and a car. Thank you for you. Stacy says, thank you so much for this webinar. You're welcome. I'm a broken record. It was amazing. Definitely going to check out your YouTube and podcast. They are both really great, if I do say so myself. And I say that in part because I'm absolutely so crushing on my podcast co-host. Amy is such a wealth of knowledge. So between the two of us, you get a good dose of laughter because we're both goofballs. And I think a pretty good dose of knowledge with the podcast. And then YouTube, I don't know if you can see it behind me right now, but this big thing is my camera. I have to leave all my YouTube shit in the middle of the room in between videos, because if I take it all down, I'm just not motivated to do YouTube videos. So I have to leave my back office here totally cluttered. And I realize it looks janky on camera, but I don't care. So that's my camera. But behind the camera, that whiteboard is where I'm usually standing for my YouTube videos. And I actually draw things out on the whiteboard and I explain stuff. I usually explain the mechanism or the physiology or the biology of what's happening. And then we get into treatment strategies after you have a better understanding of what's going on. So my YouTube channel is much more like explainer video style with me drawing on a whiteboard. The podcast is obviously more of a conversation. Star says, thank you as always. You're welcome, Star. How do you know leaky gut is gone? Good question, Wendy. Testing ultimately would probably be your best bet. Otherwise, you don't truly know, do you? And I say that a little bit facetiously. I don't do a ton of testing, but ultimately, if you really want to know if leaky gut's gone, you've just got to retest for it. A lot of the symptoms of leaky gut will parallel symptoms of dysbiosis and SIBO and candida and parasites. So it's really hard to pin down whether or not leaky gut is gone based purely on symptoms. Nicole with an H says, I agree on IgG tests. My sons came back positive in the 90s. Yeah, they're not intrinsically bad, but they're not great either. Jesselyn says, low sulfur diet helps, but now I feel stuck. You recommend working meat back in or staying vegan for general health? Thanks for the encouragement. Well, you're welcome for the encouragement. I do recommend working meat into your diet for health purposes if you can. Here's the thing though. Sulfur is a whole thing. Hydrogen sulfide is a whole deal. We actually have an entire episode on the IBS Freedom podcast entirely dedicated to hydrogen sulfide SIBO and hydrogen sulfide dysbiosis. So definitely check it out. The primer, though, I will say, is that out of all the foods that contain sulfur, I think things like onion and garlic and cruciferous vegetables get a bad rap for containing a lot of sulfur. They are a drop in the bucket compared to eggs, dairy, beef, and lamb. So if you're needing to minimize sulfur for a short period of time, like I'm talking a week or two, those are the 4 primary foods to watch out for. But that being said, restricting dietary sulfur has not been shown to help with hydrogen sulfide SIBO. It can help band-aid a little bit. I'll sometimes use like that low sulfur modified diet for a few weeks if I have a colitis patient and a really wicked flare, because a lot of colitis patients have issues with hydrogen sulfide production. But it's really a very short-term band-aid. Your body needs sulfur in order to make a very important antioxidant called glutathione, and you need glutathione to heal your gut lining. And you need glutathione to manage inflammation so that you don't wipe out your motility. And it's a very slippery slope. So don't eliminate sulfur for long periods of time. I recommend only 1 or 2 weeks to help pull my colitis patients out of a nasty flare. And I'm talking like bloody diarrhea flare. So otherwise, I tend to not use it. And I don't recommend low sulfur diets for hydrogen sulfide SIBO. And actually, the low FODMAP diet specifically has been shown to increase the production of hydrogen sulfide. So, whoopsie daisy. I've been saying for years, not to get self-righteous, but I've been saying for years that low FODMAP does not treat SIBO, and it's probably doing more harm than good. And we finally have some degree of proof of that. Annie says, thanks so much, very helpful. You're welcome. Jamie said, I've never heard of prokinetics. Do you have recommendations? Yes, on my YouTube channel. That is a big topic to get into right now, but hold on, I will put that link there. Yes, I love prokinetics. They are amazing and stupendous and wonderful, but it entirely is up to your body which one it's going to like. So you've got to try them out. What I did is I compiled my data from working with my patients and my students in FODMAP Freedom, because I had them try the prokinetics as well. And I've compiled data for which ones tend to be the winners when people try all of them. And I gave you a little bit of information in that video. So go ahead and try that. Okay, Eliana says, I tried motility activator and it burned. Is my digestive tract too angry to use it? Maybe. It's probably the ginger. You're probably going to want to stay away from the prokinetics that have ginger, but you could try other ones. So in that same video, I mentioned a product called Acetyl CH Active. It's ACETYL-CH Active. I mentioned that in that video. That is one of the few prokinetic blends that don't have ginger in them. You could also take any of those ingredients from those products and you could try them individually. So you could try plain old artichoke leaf or plain 5-HTP or even melatonin or bentophiamine, the fat-soluble version of vitamin B1. You could try any of these individual ingredients if the ones with ginger seem to provoke your symptoms, but pretty much all of them have ginger to some degree. Let's see. Andy says, do I work with international folk? I do. The 2 tricks with international work is that it could be really tricky / impossible for me to order lab work. So we're kind of limited there. Sometimes I can order a little bit of lab work, or I can help you request it from your primary care, but that does get a little squirrely. If you're in Canada, Canada's a little easier to work around, but not entirely. But the short answer is yes. And then the other thing is getting herbs and getting supplements for you. But I've worked with people in the UK, Australia, Brazil, Germany. I've worked with a good handful of people, and we could usually finagle a way around it. It just takes a little bit more effort for us to get the testing that we want to get and to ultimately help you choose supplements and herbs that are available in your location. But yeah, we can work together if you're not in the US. How do you test for leaky gut? How can you tell whether you're absorbing nutrients? Those are 2 different questions. Leaky gut, there's a lot of different tests for leaky gut. I haven't fully made up my mind if one is fully superior. The lactulose mannitol urine test is probably the most backed up with research. There's also blood tests for things like LPS antibodies and zonulin. So it kind of depends, but most often, if I think people will tolerate the sugar, I'll usually do the lactulose mannitol ratio test. I use one from Genova Diagnostics. And then absorbing your nutrients, that's touching on the subject of malabsorption, which is a whole can of worms that I don't think we have time to get into right now. Side note, I do have to be mindful of the time, guys. So probably I'll answer a few more questions and then we'll start to wrap up because I need to be doing something at 1:30 and it is currently 1:22. So just to give you a heads up of that. But malabsorption, that is a whole big kit and caboodle. Ultimately, what you could do is do a test for various nutrients and see if you have adequate levels. So you could test iron or B12 or folate or magnesium, and you could just see where your levels are when you test. If your levels come back low, 100% I would suspect inadequate intake before I ever suspect malabsorption. Many of my patients with IBS, SIBO, and IBD have come to me and they tell me I have malabsorption. I don't absorb anything. My vitamins are chronically low. And then we have them do some nutrition tracking and it turns out they just don't ingest them. I fell into this trap recently. I got some routine blood work back and my iron was a little bit low. And I thought, gosh, golly gee, I know I eat enough iron. I eat a lot of iron. Thank you very much. I eat red meat probably once or twice a week. My goodness gracious. And I thought, that is preposterous. And then I did tracking on my own diet and I put my money where my mouth was. I was not eating enough iron. God, like I out of 2 weeks of data, side note, if those of you who don't know, so there's different apps like MyFitnessPal. The one that I like is called Chronometer or Chronometer, I'm not sure. But if you look at my apps, it's this little like bullseye apple looking thing. I have no idea if it's focusing, if you can see that. Anyway, hopefully you can see that. But the app is called Chronometer or Chronometer. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. And you can log in your foods every day. If you do that for a week and then you look at your nutrient levels, you might be surprised where they're at. I eat a self-proclaimed fairly healthy diet other than my giant bar of chocolate. And I thought for sure I was getting enough of these nutrients and I was chronically undershooting, especially on iron. So you've got to be mindful of your intake and you've really got to measure it. Don't just get stuck in your head and think, I know I take in enough iron. Don't do that. You have to measure it and track it. And you can do so for free with apps on a smartphone or on the computer. So track, ensure that you're getting adequate intake. And if you are getting adequate intake and you still have low levels in your blood, then I would start to think malabsorption. Maybe. Jesselyn said, oh my gosh, this is so encouraging. Yay. I've been taking Epsom salt baths for sulfate, but thank you. You're welcome. Yeah, I think Epsom salt baths are wonderful. It's not ultra sustainable though. You're probably sick of taking those damn baths at this point. But yeah, I think the sulfur veggies are a drop in the bucket compared to, like I said, red meat, eggs, dairy. Those are your big culprits for sulfur purposes. It's not to say they're bad. It's just those are the heaviest hitters. What diet do I recommend for SIBO? Currently in GAPS but don't like it. Haven't seen a change. If you haven't seen a change, it's not helping you. I would get off GAPS. Honestly, I don't prescribe specific diets for SIBO. I think you just need to eat healthy and ensure a wide variety of plant foods, ensure a wide variety of different nutrition and fibers, and that is the SIBO diet. I detest low FODMAP. I detest the SCD low FODMAP combo, the biphasic diet. They're all garbage because they all assume that you can starve SIBO, and that is 100% categorically false. You're never going to starve SIBO to death. You might starve it to a point where you don't make as much gas for a little bit, and it feels like you're treating it, but you're really just band-aiding the SIBO. And I guarantee it because the minute you look cross-eyed at a damn onion, the SIBO comes right back. If you were really starving it, the SIBO would not come back and you would be able to get off the stupid diet. So I don't recommend a SIBO diet, just eat healthy. Jesslyn says, is molybdenum a mineral I should stop taking for hydrogen sulfide too? I take B12 and butyrate as well. Hard to say. I don't find that a lot of people need supplemental molybdenum. You're getting into two different categories, whether you're aware of it or not. So there's how the microbiome processes sulfur. That's one thing. So that would be related to like hydrogen sulfide production, hydrogen sulfide SIBO, that sort of stuff. Then there's the way that our bodies process sulfur and sulfate. You do need some molybdenum to make the SUOX enzyme go, but not a lot of people have to support that intrinsically, at least not for a long period of time. I don't supplement with molybdenum typically, maybe if it's in a multivitamin, but I don't really supplement with molybdenum. Even like if you're into like the 23andMe and the genetic stuff, I fell down a rabbit hole on that a couple years back. I have the genetic SNP that theoretically would mean that I would need more molybdenum. I haven't noticed anything profound from it, so I don't really use it. All right, and then guys, let's see. Okay. So it looks like Jamie has a couple questions at the bottom. So guys, I'm gonna cut us off. So Jamie's questions are gonna be the last questions I'm gonna address, if that's all right. I would stay out here forever with you guys, but I do need to get going in a minute. But Rebecca said, when you mentioned to focus on fiber, you mentioned good fiber sources, even those that are low FODMAP. Yes, it's at the holiday goodie link here. Hold on. So if you go here, the first link is right here, Rebecca. So it's the low FODMAP fiber sources. It's a printable guide that I made you guys. So yes, I do. Oh, how do I do this now? My own PowerPoint, getting away from me here. Yes, let's see. Nicole with an H. I'm just gonna call you Nicole with an H, by the way, because I think it's hilarious. This has helped me try to figure out my oldest son. Are you taking new clients? I'm in Simpsonville, South Carolina. Oh, South Carolina. I have no idea where Simpsonville is, honestly, but South Carolina is all pretty close to me. Yes, I do. I am working with new clients or patients. We could either do virtual, or if you want to drive up here for the first appointment, then we could do a bit of a physical exam, get to know each other better. That potentially would work too, but all the info is on my website. Hold on, it's actually not this website. Hold on. I have two websites. There you go. So infinityholistichealth.com is the name of Infinity Holistic Healthcare is my clinic. So that's the website for my actual clinic. And then FODMAP Freedom is where I put the goodies for this. And then it's also where I house my courses like FODMAP Freedom. So yeah, you can check that out and see if it resonates. And then we could either work together one-on-one, or perhaps you could learn a lot in either Digestion Reboot or FODMAP Freedom, one of my courses. And then Jamie said, before you go, technical difficulty, don't see the link you left for Prokinetics. I didn't give a link for the Prokinetics. I gave a link for the YouTube channel. So if you look, here you go. Okay, so here's my YouTube channel. And then at least on my end, if you open it on the browser, you should be able to type in here the word Prokinetics. Well, I have other ones too. So what is a prokinetic? It made an appearance on my SIBO mistakes series, which I did a number of years ago. SIBO prevention with prokinetics. Oh, this is an amusing story, the time I accidentally discovered a prokinetic. And then here's the one that you want, probably. Best prokinetic for SIBO and IBS, 2020 research update with Dr. DiNezza. So if you just go to Triangle Holistic Gut Health on YouTube, and then you search for the word prokinetic, it should pop up, or you can just scroll back. And I made that video in the summer of 2020. Let's see. Checked your live YouTube and only see the FODMAP link for whatever reason. Yeah, just if you're on the YouTube channel, just go back through my older videos. It's only about a year and 2 months old, I think. Great, I'll likely watch all of them too. Have at it, enjoy. Alicia says, thank you for your time and all the info. You're welcome. And Eliana says, thank you for helping today. Really appreciate your help. You are welcome too. So guys, it was an absolute pleasure. Like I said, I gotta get going. It is 1:30 now, but thank you so much. Oh, I'm gonna check really quick on the YouTube. Okay, nobody is chatting on YouTube. So they're, for whatever reason, not chatting very much, but on Zoom, you guys are. Thank you guys for your attention. I know that we went quite a bit over, I think a lot of you guys stayed right until the end. I give you a lot of credit because this was only supposed to be a 1-hour webinar. And I know I kept you way over time, but thank you guys for making it fun and interactable and giving me such good feedback. I really appreciate your time. Go find my resources. Again, I've got lots of free info on my YouTube channel. I think I have 200 videos right now on YouTube and counting. We've got 60 plus episodes on the IBS Freedom podcast, and on Instagram, I share very goofy videos, but the real relevant info that you probably want, the real learning, is to be had in the comment of all of my Instagram reels. I always write up about what I'm talking about in the video and provide links and provide resources in there. So I'm at Triangle Guts on Instagram, which here I'll show you real quick. No, that's not what I meant to do. Hold on. Darn it. Didn't mean to show you my inbox. Oh, for heaven's sakes. Hold on. Hold on. Yeah, so there we go. So Triangle Guts, plural, is my Instagram handle. You can see all my goofy ass videos here, including my Halloween costume video. And I already gave you my info for YouTube. And then I will be emailing out this link for the goodies. I forget if it's today or tomorrow, but I'll send that to you at some point too. So enjoy. I hope this helped. Thank you guys for making this fun. And I will hopefully see you somewhere else on the internet, whether it be YouTube, podcast, Instagram, or elsewhere. I hope to see you sometime very, very soon. Take care, guys.